Hear me?
Was a king without his crown. Was a cage where your soul found God. Freedom. Freedom, freedom.
What's good out there?
What is up, everybody? Welcome back.
What up, though? What up, though?
We got one for you.
This right here gonna be heavy, man. I hope y'all ready. I mean, y'all seen the title. Not all slavery was the same, and here's why. Reparations are non-negotiable. Non-negotiable, people. This is what we have to understand. And I'm gonna do a little bit of talking in the beginning. Hopefully, if you would look out for the guys that come in and be commenting, because I might miss some.
I got you.
You know, this is what we have to understand right here. Reparations are a debt. What does that mean? That means when the debt collector comes to you, he's coming to collect the debt, not negotiate the debt. That means you owe. There's no other way to look at it. Reparations is a debt, and we're going to show you why today. This right here is a financial conversation, as Thought always like to say.
Exactly.
This ain't about blaming nobody. This ain't about looking down on anybody and saying it's anyone's fault, because it's not anyone in particular's fault. It is something that we were grandfathered into. Okay, now I'm going to explain a few terms that you're going to need to know as I go through this. But here's the premise I'm going to give you in the front. Why reparations are owed. And as the title says, all slavery was not the same. This is what you need to understand right here. And I'm going to put this up. You have Euro-Atlantic versus Indo-Pacific.
Pacific.
And then you have Afro-Euro-Asia. Okay, now, this is important right here. What must be understood, and you have to understand this in order for this to go across. Indo-European is not European. Indo, let's go ahead and put this back up. Indo, I-N-D-O, Pacific, but it comes from Indo-European. Indo-European is not European. What do I mean? And I'm going to show you. The people of Greece, the people of Rome, and the people of the so-called Middle East are, and China, Asia, are Indo-European. They're different from European. European ends up becoming, and I hate to use this word because I have the loss of the word, the exact word. The European mutated from the Indo-European. Indo-European is Arab, Turkey, Greece, and all them stories of the ancients that you hear, along with the Chinese. Later on, you got somewhat, and Moore talks about this too. You have somewhat, and it's not a popular word, a mutation that came from the Indo-European to the European. So the first people to conquer and to enslave were the Indo-European. All of the Indo-European were people of color, not black. They had color in their skin. They were the first to enslave on a ethnic hereditary basis. No, hierarchical ethnic basis. There was no such thing as race. And slavery was for prisoners of war because the Indo-European was a warring culture. If you lost, you got enslaved. We're going to explain that as we go along, as we show more, but I have to start you off with this premise. The Indo-European were the first to enslave what we now understand the modern definition of white European. They were the first to be enslaved by the Indo-European that were a different ethnic group by color, even though color did not exist at that point. So the slavery at that point was slavery by practice only. The reason why there is a debt owed to us or black people is only because what the Indo-European did to other ethnic Indo-Europeans and what we understand as white European today was by practice. When the white European took over, they made it into law, commercial law. So what am I saying? They took the actual, what was done in practice and made it into coded law. But what they did, and I personally believe this, I can't prove this, I personally believe that they went to the Indo-European, what we now understand as the white European, and made a deal. Let's stop enslaving each other and let's enslave them, which became black people. And I'm going to show you where this all started. And then that's what created race in 1492 in what we understand the edicts of demarcation. Edicts, not edict. Edicts, more than one, that basically placed all black people into hereditary servitude based on the mother. You would be born into it. And it was made the law. So basically what was done in practice that could not be enforced, what would become the white European made it a law. So there would be no way that black people could escape from this servitude. That was an economic servitude. That's why there is a debt, because there was an economic decision encoded in law that trapped a people for profit. That's why it's owed. And that's what you have to understand. When somebody comes along to you and say, well, everybody enslaved. No, they enslaved in practice. They did everything, but it was not made a law. It was made a law when what we understand as white Europeans made it law, global law. We're going to show you how that happened today. First, this young lady right here, I borrowed some of her stuff. Me and thought we cut it up. Ashley, check her out on YouTube. A lot of y'all might be familiar with this gentleman here or see him a lot, you know, with stuff on YouTube and how he speaks about a lot of the things that's going on in the world today, far as blacks, European, and some of everybody. Bolson right here. And this gentleman right here is one hell of a historical scholar, Roy Casagrande. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce that. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, if he ever sees this, I hope he forgives me. Okay, now what I'm about to show you today, my book right here that I keep telling you all about, and more got it. This goes a lot deeper, but I'm gonna scrape the surface, and we're going to give you something today to help you win any debate. Any debate. It's important to know these terminologies. Euro-Atlantic. While in the Atlantic Ocean, you had the slave trade going on. In the Pacific Ocean, which is Indo-Pacific after Indo-European, you had the trade of opium going on at the same time. Okay. Now, Indo-Pacific is from Indo-European. That is the old order in which they enslaved different ethnic groups, Indo-ethnic groups, and they enslaved what we now understand as white Europeans under that in practice. Emphasis in practice. The Euro-Atlantic came along. That is your current day European that we understand today as white European. They created a world, and it's called the Atlantic world. That's why it's called the Atlantic slave trade. Because under the Atlantic slave trade, right here, Europeans encoded the racial caste in global law, Atlantic world, okay? Indo-Pacific or Indo-European world is in practice slavery. Euro-Atlantic is by law, encoded in law that designated a certain people. And we're going to show you that today. So that's why reparations is old. Okay, now we're going to start to move through this. I'm going to have to stop in certain parts and read certain stuff that you guys are going to see. This book right here is a very important book, and you're going to be reading some of the pages out of this that's going to help you understand how this whole Ponzi scheme came together. This is called the Promissory Notes on the Treasury of Merit. Promissory note. Promissory notes were called indulgences then on the Treasury of Merit. Treasury of Merit is going to mean a whole different thing once we're done. Okay, now we're going to move forward with this, and I'm going to come back to some more stuff, but keep those things in mind that we didn't already stated. Okay, let's go.
So let me tell you a story that was never supposed to be told. Because if people really understood how chattel slavery started, they'd have to admit that this country was never innocent. It wasn't founded on freedom. It was founded on a formula: blood, control, and legal torture. See, chattel slavery wasn't just slavery. It was the most brutal, calculated system of human degradation ever written into law. And America didn't inherit it. It built it on purpose. So we're taught that the story starts in 1619 when the original enslaved people arrived in Virginia. But it really starts way before that on the coast of West Africa, where human beings were hunted, villages raided, mothers dragged from their homes, babies taken from their backs, people chained together, branded with hot irons, burned like cattle before they even touched a slave ship.
Let's not forget, branded is branding. Say it again. Branded is branding. Commercial. Taking babies and all that, chaining people together because you belonged as property. And that's what the Atlantic slave trade did. Come from the Atlantic world, created by law, by what we understand today as white European. Okay, but we're going to show you what this whole thing divides. We're going to move on to this next one.
Now, the Roman Empire internally was not very rich. Africa became the breadbasket for the Roman Empire. And except for Africa, the Roman Empire would not have been able to sustain itself. Now, the Roman presence in North Africa is going to force into being one of the great events in human history. Roman taxation, Roman oppression would cause people to turn to new gods and question old gods, to turn to a story about a God who comes forth to rescue them.
Roman taxation. This people is all about money. And the taxation, there's a spiritual taxation, there's a physical taxation. This is all about money. That must be understood out the gate. This starts in Rome. What's good, unknown? This starts in Rome. But he said that the Roman Empire could not sustain itself. It was not very wealthy. The Republic of Rome started, I think, 500 BC or something like that. But the Roman Empire started in 31 AD. And this was the whole thing that started between Caesar going on with Mark Antony, fighting with Cleopatra and all that to take over Egypt, because Egypt then is not Egypt now. Egypt was the breadbasket of the world. They shipped grain all around the world at that time. Understand, Caesar, Mark Antony, Cleopatra are Indo-European. They are not European. The Greek, Roman, that whole world there was in response or creation of the Indus Valley. And that's where they borrowed from. There was no current day understanding of white European, period. These were all people of color, not black people, but they had color in their skin. The white European, as we understand it today, will come along much later. So it's important with this distinction, because I'm going to help you understand some more things about Rome. So just hold tight. We're about to move on to the next thing. Now I'm going to talk behind this. This next thing, this is very important. Could you take that down? What's up? What's up? What's up, bro? Change, man. What's up, family? I'm about to show you something now that y'all need to pay attention, because this is where the shenanigans start. Okay? Right here. In 1213, King John of England knelt and surrendered his crown to Pope Innocent III, envoy. Threatened by excommunication and French invasion, John was forced to declare England a vassal state of Rome. In one moment of submission and the balance of power in medieval Europe became unmistakable. The Pope stood above kings. This is when you get divine right. He gave his crown and his sovereignty of his land of England to the Pope. What happened in 1213? The Magna Carta came along in 1213. 2 years prior to that, he did an agreement with the Pope in 1211. But he ended up losing his sovereignty and gave it over to the Pope. In today's term, basically, he gave the Pope the first lien of title, and he held the second. And that's when you got the creation of divine right. Divine meaning the Pope as divine, the vicar of Christ appoints who will be king. But this all comes from what Dr. Henry Clark talked about in 325 AD. There was a document called the Donation of Constantine that the popes went around at that time, because the Pope had no power. The Pope ain't what you understand it as today, Indo-European though, and went around with this document and started tricking kings, telling them that Constantine made an agreement in 313 that all the property that he owned, that they now ruled over, was given to the church. But that particular church was presided over by black, not people of color, black bishops. This goes back to this. This goes back to this right here. Where's this at? Because before the Indo-Pacific or Indo-European, you had Afro-Eurasia. And under that, you had the Egyptian Empire, you had the Persian Empire, and you had your Buddhists over there that were in power then. Before you had Greece with Alexander the Great and all that started the era of the Indo-European. Okay, I want to bog y'all down too much with all that. Okay, now let me read this to you. Matter of fact, let me put this up so y'all can look at this as I read this thing right here to you. So you're seeing the Pope and you're seeing King John. Okay. Indo-European societies created early systems of caste and enslavement based on ancestry and ethnicity. Many of these people who were dominated under this system later became the populations who we now call white Europeans. But in the Atlantic world, their descendants transformed the ancient practice into something entirely new, a racial legal system that targeted Black people exclusively. For the first time in history, enslavement became hereditary, color coded, and protected by law, guaranteeing that all Africans and their descendants would be a permanent slave class by law. In this system, whiteness became a property interest, and the state used law to ensure that the commercial benefits of slavery remained monopolized by white Europeans and their descendants. This didn't just preserve the practice of enslavement, it perfected it into a racial system designed to last in perpetuity. Perpetuity meaning forever. That's why what we understand as white European encoded it in law. Prior to that, again, I cannot state it enough. Prior to that, it was not. It was in practice. It was not law. That's why they owe. Okay, now we're going to move on. I got some more stuff I need to read, but I'm not trying to bog y'all down with the read now. But you need to know this stuff in order to be able to push people up off you when they come with the craziness. But we're trying to show y'all the economic structure of this whole scheme. What I'm about to drop right now, I'm about to go back and I'm going to read some of this, but pay close attention to this because these documents that this gentleman is about to state, listen to the wording. Listen to the wording.
On this week's episode of Secret Societies Exposed, we have my personal favorite, the Roman Catholic Church. This is Pope Nicholas V. He issued the papal bull Dum Diversas, allowing Portugal to reduce any Saracens, Muslims, and pagans, and any other unbelievers into perpetual slavery. Shortly after, in 1455, he issued Romanus Pontifex, declaring war on all of the non-Christian nations and peoples across the globe. The church sanctioned, encouraged the conquest, colonization, and exploitation of non-Christians. This papal bull helped expand Portugal's slave trade into Africa. This allowed King Alfonso V to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever and any other enemies of the Christ, and to take away all their possessions, property, both movable and immovable. That sounds like a jack move to me. Next up, it's this dude, Rodrigo Borgia, otherwise known as Pope Alexander VI. He issued the Inter Caetera. That decree justified Spain's seizure of lands in the name of Christian expansion and led to the doctrine of discovery becoming the basis of European land claims. He also had his illegitimate son, Caesar Borgia, painted as the image of the Christ. So what does this all mean, Peas? Well, the long and short of it is, the doctrine of discovery allowed Spain and Portugal and the Roman Catholic Church to rob, rape, and pillage their way around the entire world. And seeing that the Roman Catholic Church is one of the wealthiest organizations in the world, and also one of the biggest landowners in the world, I would say it's time for them to start giving it all back. I would say it's time for the Roman Catholic Church to start giving it all back.
Now, Alfonso, if that's it, I probably chopped it up. But it gave him the right to go into these foreign lands. And you seen what it gave him the right. That was law. That's the law that I'm talking about. That started it all. That put Black people exclusively into slave by law. What that say? Thought.
The homie was saying he went ahead and grabbed the book. What up, though? I just finished the book and makes you not even want to get high in the cartel. Yeah. Yeah, he was for sure stressful. We'll for
Okay.
sure say that, brother.
So this is what y'all got to understand. Okay. Now I'm about to read a few things, but what gave? Could you take that down? Thought.
Yeah, for sure.
What gave Alfonso the permission was what you heard that gentleman just read, because under this understanding of what I'm about to read you, the Pope had divine right over everything, and he used the document of the donation of Constantine, because Rome could not get spiritual power or actual power for the king until they had to make an agreement with the church. The church was the Black church in Northern Africa. Okay, now let me read a few things, and it's going to show y'all how this whole thing got brought together right here. Let me go. Now, some of this is going to be small on my side, but pay attention to this. This is the conversation that was going on before King John gave up his actual sovereignty to the Pope. You got April 1163 right here. Pay attention to the wording. Listen to this is almost, this is not even almost. This is accounting information. Listen. Y'all can see it yourself. It's kind of small, so I might chop some of it up. Valid confessions and receive the grace of absolution and the sacraments of penance. Could make withdrawals from the treasury for the payments of spiritual debt. Withdrawals, people, withdrawals from the treasury for the payments of spiritual debts. This is the basis of this stuff now. And analogy of, and this is one of the spiritual philosophers at the time, I can't pronounce his name. The treasury was deposited in a great chest, which the church could open as needed or desired, much like a royal treasury chest, which would be full not only of gold and silver, but other signs of the king's wealth and power, such as, pay attention, jewels and important charters. What did the Pope do with King John? The Magna Carta. What does Magna Carta mean? Great Charter. Pay attention, folks. This is the game I'm giving y'all right here. Okay, what the hell am I? Okay, the church deposits of merit required the keeper of the keys. Pay attention to the keys, because I'm going to show you the keys in a minute. The keys to open it. Aside from the work and the piety of the penitent and the church pool of merit, a grant of, I can't see that word there, indulgence also requires the proper church authority, that is only bishops could grant what is that? Pardons, as the following concessions made by Pope Alexander III, and it gives you the date. The name there is in another language, but it's basically spiritual authority. That ecclesia, whatever the hell the name of that is right there. Now, I don't want to drag y'all down too long, but this document here goes into, and it quotes scripture in it, and it's telling you what gives the Pope the right, and he even classifies the Jesus as the good merchant. Right, let me read this right here. The authority highlights the biblical imagery. Jerome describes Jesus as the price of humanity's redemption for the slavery of sin. Augustus called him the good merchant. Merchant, people, who purchased men and women to be the slaves of God, a blessed bondage. Pay attention to this. Look at this right here. This is stuff that y'all can read later. This thing right here talks about the keys of jurisdiction. We'll talk about that in a minute, because I see I'm losing some of y'all. So we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, you heard what the gentleman said about the different laws or whatever, and the edicts of demarcation. Now look how I go down.
Words, this idea of Spain was really created in 1492 by Queen Isabella, right? She's the person who creates Spain. The Roman province was called Hispania, and that's where España, the name, comes from.
Makes sense.
But Isabella, the Queen of Castile and Leon, is the person who created Spain. She said, there will be a Spain, and boom, there it was. She was that powerful. She was an absolute monarch who was a visionary and literally created a country. And changed the way the world thought about that place, and in the process created an empire that spanned, they owned the Philippines, they owned North and South America, and then eventually she had married so heavily into the Holy Roman Empire that they owned Germany and Italy and Portugal. I mean, they had colonies in Africa and India. You're like, how did you do this?
She got the colonies from the documents that you heard read out in the video just before. Spain did not exist. Check it right now. Google it. Spain was founded in 1492. I already showed y'all when actual slavery started. I showed y'all that actual slavery started. Where is it at? Actual slavery started in 1492 by law. And that's the importance, by law. And those are the empires behind it. Those are the two keys that you see below the Pope's hat. Right there on, I guess it would be my right, probably your right too. Those keys are called the keys of jurisdiction. The one document I pointed to, I didn't read because I was losing y'all. The one key is a spiritual key that gives him spiritual jurisdiction. The other key gives him actual physical jurisdiction. And those keys will be defined as non-secular and secular. So when he talked about Queen Isabella, said there will be a kingdom because she did it under the authority of the 1492 agreement that it was just shown to you in the last video. And then how she ended up, she just got all these colonies. It was just amazing. She got the colonies under the perceived authority of the land or public jurisdiction that the Pope supposed to have had by divine right. The crown on the other side is the crown of the public jurisdiction that represents basically the left or silver key. I'm giving y'all the real, folks, but I'm showing you where all this madness actually came from. Okay, we're going to move forward on some more videos because I don't want to drag this out too long because y'all know y'all got short attention span. Here we go.
It actually starts in Spain. So the Reconquista, which is a poorly named event, the reconquest, how can you reconquer something when you never owned it to begin with? So the idea is that the northern Christian kingdoms in the Iberian Peninsula are going to conquer from the Muslims the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, and then eventually Portugal and Spain are created out of that. And they called it the Reconquista as if they had owned it at one point, but they didn't. This is a different people now, because the population of people that the Arabs conquered when they conquered the Iberian Peninsula, it was German-ruled Iberia. It was Visigoths that were ruling it. And before them, the Vandals had ruled the south. That's where Andalusia comes from, because there's no va in Arabic. They just dropped the sound. And then before that, it was the Roman Empire. And in other words, this idea of Spain was really created in 1492 by Queen Isabella, right? She's the person who creates Spain.
He stated these were a different people. That's letting you know what I told you right before. These people are Indo-European. The people that were coming down from the north were what we today define as white European. He just told you right there. Okay, and then he talked about the conquista, whatever, the reconquer, the claim back. How could you claim back something you didn't own? Because Indo-Europeans own that land, not Europeans. The reason they were able to claim it, because of the documents that the Pope said he had authority or jurisdiction over all that land. So under that ideology, that land, since he's the vicar of Christ, already belonged to him by divine right. Well, he was divine, and he gave the divine right to the kings to go take it under that perceived authority. That perceived law, because that's what it was. Now, I told you that these what we call today white Europeans basically copied what was done in practice and coded it in law. Now I'm going to show you exactly what they did, because I'm going to give you an example of what Rome did that were Indo-European.
When I was a kid, I was told the Romans were great inventors. It's not true. They didn't invent much. I was told that they were really great at innovating. This, again, not true. They were great merchants. Again, not true. They conquered people who were decent merchants, but they themselves really weren't into it. What they did was they created a great war machine. And then they used that war machine to conquer other people and then plunder their wealth and then take over their trade routes and then steal their technology and also, of course, enslave a portion of that population. That only worked as long as the Romans could keep conquering, but at some point they had conquered past their technology's ability to allow them to go any further. So when I was a kid, I was taught the Romans invented roads. That's dumb. The first person to walk from point A to point B 20 times invented the first road. I think what they meant was they invented the first paved roads. That's not true, but that's maybe what they meant. The ancient Egyptians invented the first paved road about 5,000 years ago when they took petrified wood logs, split them in half, and used them to build a road so that they could move stuff from a stone quarry out. And then, so I think maybe they meant the world's first paved roads, like as in cement roads. But that's also not true. They were in the Middle East. The Middle East did cement roads first. What the Romans did do, however, was build an extensive road network that was cement, and it was incredible. They didn't invent it, but they did something that nobody else had ever done. And they built the spider web across Europe and North Africa and Southwest Asia so that they could maximize the distance their legions could get to conquer. But they had reached that limit. Romania, named after the Romans, was the limit. They got to Romania, they conquered it, they enslaved the population, but they got really, 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 really lucky because in 31 BC they conquered Egypt, and Egypt had the Great Library. It meant that they didn't have to conquer to get new technology anymore.
So therefore, it shows you right there what the other video told you. The land of Hispania belonged to the Romans, and they conquered up to Romania. So the population of then, what now we understand as white Europeans, was coming from the north, and they were coming down and conquering. But under the Pope's ideology and law, all that land had belonged to him because of the ideology of the whole vicar concept that created that said law. But what's most important about that? Remember, the white European we understand today took the same format that the Indo-European used, Romans. He talked about how they made roads like a spider web going out to use to conquer. And I told you that the Indo-Pacific was land-based. I told you that the Atlantic world, Atlantic slave trade, was water-based. So what did the white European do? He encoded in law all this, but he put a spider web out, but he put it out in water. Same concept, but by water. The whole objective was to control the waterways. Same thing, just one on land, one in the water. That's proof to you that they copied the concept of the Indo-European and encoded it in law for their economic purpose and monopolized all of it. And I personally believe they cut a deal with the Indo-Europeans and basically said, you won't enslave us no more, we won't enslave you. This is my opinion. We'll enslave them now. Let's move on.
Now, what am I saying? Later, in retrospect, he was referred to as Jesus Christ. Now, you can argue about the coloration of Christ if you want to, but I can sell that very quick and we can go on to the next subject. Was he a Roman? The answer is no. Was he a Greek? The answer is still no. These were the only European types in that part of the world at the time. If he was neither Roman or Greek, he was one of those other people. And all of those other people were non-European and non-white. and he came from the other people. The Romans and the Greeks had no color prejudice comparable to the kind of prejudice we would know later on. Otherwise, why would 3 Africans become emperors of Rome? Why would there be 3 African popes? Finally, Constantine decided to make Christianity the religion of the whole of the Roman Empire. Now we're coming to the critical period when the Roman domination of the church so corrupted the church, the Africans began some disenchantment with the Roman interpretation of Christianity. Constantine calls a council of bishops and priests at a place called Nice. It's the Nicene Conference. It is at this conference that the European created a European concept of Christianity. It was at this conference that they began to take the African saints out of the literature of Christianity. Now the corruption had started. The physical concept of Jesus Christ did not exist.
For the sake of moving on, I'm going to move you on to the next one before I drop some more on you. Hold on. Here we go.
Religion is the organization of spirituality into something that became the handmaiden of conquerors. Nearly all religions were brought to people and imposed on people by conquerors and used as the framework to control their minds. My main point here is that if you are the child of God and God is a part of you, then in your imagination, God's supposed to look like you. And when you accept a picture of the deity assigned to you by another people, you become the spiritual prisoners of that other people.
Now let me give you the play. Right here, you have to understand what he's saying. The Christianity was changed, and it was changed to conquer for the purpose of commerce. Some of that stuff that I didn't read, that hopefully y'all go back and read and look at the book, my book and the book I showed y'all will give you the historical documentation that you can go back and find this. But you have to understand, out of the 2 keys of jurisdiction, you got a spiritual jurisdiction, you have a physical jurisdiction. Out of the 2 keys, that's up under the Pope's hat. The spiritual jurisdiction made a spiritual kingdom, God's kingdom, by law under the documents which you've seen. So when you seen missionaries going out, as back in the days you had pilgrims and missionaries that would go out in other lands and start to teach, they would get them people to that land to give them a land to build a missionary to teach them in school and preach about the church. But what them people didn't know was by law that they had established, that became a spiritual embassy. A spiritual embassy. And then if you trace the history, you will find that later on troops came and they went to them spiritual embassies and made them their initial outposts and started to conquer the people and paid the Pope a tax for using that spiritual embassy that had became the spiritual land under the spiritual authority. And they fought from those and turned those into prisons. So understand what missionary is. Missionary is a spiritual embassy of the Catholic Church. I know I'm heavy, man, but I'm showing y'all the finance. This is all finance. This is all money we talking about. And how scripture was used for that purpose. The scripture was basically used as a business plan for the Atlantic world that became the Atlantic slave trade, so on and so forth. Okay, but we ain't gonna stop there. I'm about to drop something real heavy on y'all. Pay attention to this video and what this man's saying, and then I'm gonna pray something right after that and drop something else on you. Here we go.
Have you heard of the contract between the Vatican and the King of England? Listen to this.
A lot of people do not know the Vatican made a contract with the King of England back in the Middle Ages, where the Pope said that he declared himself the vicar of Christ. The word vicar in Latin simply means someone who stands in for someone else. Today we know the Pope is the vicar of Christ. What does that mean? According to the Vatican concept that God created the whole heavens and he created the earth, he gave the earth to Jesus, his son, but since Jesus is not here right now, somebody has to run the earth. So consequently the Pope is going to stand in for him till he gets here, right? So he's the vicar of Christ. However, the Pope is very busy and he doesn't have time, so he made a contract between the King of England and the papacy in which the Pope set up the whole world in a trust and gave it to the King of England to rule the world. And at that time, the people who were called English became known as British. British comes from a Hebrew word, berith. In Hebrew, the word berith is a contract or a covenant. And ish in Hebrew means man or men. Therefore, berith-ish, contract man. This is why in the Western world, anything you're going to do in business requires a contract. That's the way the Vatican set it up. All international banking is based on contract. Consequently, all international banking law is based on Vatican canon law. Now, how many people know that?
The Vatican is Rome, and they used religion to take over the world. You can never change my mind. Peace and love, y'all. Yeah.
International banking is done by contract.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to that. International banking is done by contract. And I'm sure I'm paraphrasing here. And basically, international banking is governed by canon law. That's ecclesia under the spiritual key of jurisdiction. I'm going to show you something in a minute on that. But listen to this right here. And this is the actual book. Listen to this.
Cannon v. Worley involved an African American's attempt to purchase property on an integrated block where there were already 2 black and 8 white households. The court majority was enamored of the idea that the central purpose of the 14th Amendment was not to protect the rights of freed slaves, but a business rule, freedom of contract.
That's it right there.
Now, hold on. Let me show you this. Everything I'm showing you can go back, you can document. Look at this. There's the 2 keys I told you about. The key to the kingdom of heaven is gold. That's the spiritual. The silver key is to the kingdom of earth. The Pope's hat is sitting above that. That's because he has the jurisdiction, because he has the 2 keys of St. Peter. Let's read up here. What does it say? What is canon law? He just told you what rules international is canon law. What is canon law? The definition of canon law is the body of laws and norms that govern a particular Christian church. In the Roman Catholic Church, the code, race was made by code of canon law, is a lengthy document produced by the church which covers topics such as ecclesia laws, spiritual laws, the role of the church office, the obligation of the church, what is that? Partitioners, and the organization of ecclesia organizations. Now, let me show you a statue outside of Rome. That's Peter right there. What is he holding, Thought?
Looks like keys to me.
2 keys. 2 keys. I'm not cooking this up on y'all, people. I'm showing you all the documentation. I'm showing you where you can go find it at. I've given you the books. I wish I could read more to y'all, even though my reading horrible. But I wish I could read more to y'all so y'all can see exactly what I'm saying. And I'm going to start back on my thing again because I know, like I say, y'all lose attention span and stuff. I told you the in-depth version of this is in my book. What does it say right here on the back? The Spiritual Currency, by me, of course, explores how ancient religions, beliefs, and influence modern economic systems. The book examines how religious doctrines shaped early financial practices, including banking, trading, ethnic, and concepts of debt and credits. It devolves into how institutions rooted in religious tradition evolved into today's financial and governmental structures, affecting economic growth, capitalism, and geopolitical order. And that was written by yours truly, Thought. Now, this right here, before I get back into the videos, it's important that you guys see this one thing right here. Y'all have to see this. You have to see this. Is this it? No, that's not it. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. That's not it. That's not it. Hold on. Be patient. Okay. Right here. I'm going to read all y'all comments at the end, y'all, but hold on. Right here, what it says, indeed, pay attention to the wording. Indeed, are up onto its spiritual treasury, the Aristotelian, whatever the hell that word is, Thomas Aquinas called the treasury of merit the formal cause of pardons. Presidents and all that can give pardons today. Okay, indeed, the cause of remission, to buy back, of penalty and indulgence is nothing other than the abundance of merit of the church. Hold on. The church underwrote spiritual promissory notes. Underwrote in the same terms as when you get a mortgage, it goes to who? The underwriter. Sin was made into profit. The church underwrote spiritual promissory notes, good for penitence, outstanding debt of sin. They charged them. The metaphor of the treasury, in turn, encouraged the, damn, this thing's so small, can't see, the comparison between spiritual what? Debits and credits. What do we have today, people?
Debit and credit cards.
I'm not cooking this up, man. I'm giving y'all the play. What started with the church initially in the non-secular, under the key of jurisdiction in the spiritual, they did nothing but duplicate that same world in the public or on earth. Okay, what was your law created at? Think way back to William Wallace and all that. They went before commissions of the church. Think back about Martin Luther. They went before commissions of the church. The church, under canon law, created law and then dispersed it along to the kings that ruled that divine right. That's why you need a license to practice law, because law is owned by someone or some entity. And you were enslaved, specifically Black people, under this law. That was never a law before this time.
Yeah.
That's why you're old. Because if the law was created to monopolize slavery for monetary purpose and gain. Okay, hold on. Let me go ahead and move y'all further. Let's slide on this one.
The United States is definitely profoundly founded on this idea of white supremacy. There's no two ways about it. It had to be, because how else could you justify in your mind, I'm going to take this land from these Native Americans, and then I'm going to bring slaves over and I'm going to steal their labor. There's no way to justify that other than God really loves me, and he doesn't really like those folk as much. And as a result, it's okay for me to exploit them. Okay, so the idea of white supremacy has a really fascinating origin. It actually starts in Spain. So the Reconquista, which is a poorly named event, the reconquests. How can you reconquer something when you never owned it to begin with? So
again, the Pope gave them permission to do it. Again, the Romans that were Indo-European, not current day white European, what did? They make roads, spider web going everywhere, went into them people's area, conquer them, and enslave part of the population for the purpose of labor. What did he explain to you that was being done under white supremacy? Understand, white and black, all that did not exist before 1492.
Mm-hmm.
And it only existed because, as it stated, I wrote this down a while ago. Where's it at? Before, you didn't hear nothing about no color differences and all that in ancient texts. Why? Because there was no contrast, so therefore there was no category.
Mm-hmm.
Now, explain to you how they came out the north and came into a formerly Indo-European area that had color in their skin. So that created contrast, and under that contrast, they created law that did not exist before that created category. But this time, to not end up back into it with the Arabs or the Chinese and none of that, they're protected under these agreements, as well as the newfound description of white European, but we weren't. So they said, let's profit off of them, their land, their culture, their names, their art. And when they came into black people land, what did they do? Now understand, I'm not speaking about no people. I'm speaking about institutions that were created by law that exploited.
Yeah, we're talking not culture, we're talking commercial.
Commercial. But we ain't gonna stop there. Let's continue to go. Here we go.
Villages raided, mothers dragged from their homes, babies taken from their backs, people chained together, branded with hot irons, burned like cattle before they even touched a slave ship. Then came the Middle Passage, bodies stacked below deck, no air, no light, no dignity. Many died. Some jumped into the ocean on their own terms. They would rather drown than be sold. But when they arrived in the colonies, they weren't welcomed. They were inspected, priced, and sold. Children torn from mothers, spouses separated without a second thought. And the worst part, there were no laws protecting them, because there were no laws that recognized them as human. They weren't seen as people, because they were property.
Those laws took away the humanity of those people and made them, what's the word I use? Made them, what's that stuff called? Inventory.
Mm-hmm.
They were no longer, they were inventory.
Yeah, they became a commodity.
A commodity that you place your brand on.
Yeah.
And if you listen to think back of that whole video, the conversation they're separating commodities for commerce. There was no humanity left from those laws. And what did it state in there? It stated the Vatican approved it, the Crown enforced it by divine right, America perfected it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move forward.
And yeah, some African leaders played a role in the trade. Some sold prisoners of war or rival groups into European hands. But this idea that Africans sold their own people, that's a distraction. Africa is a continent full of hundreds of cultures and languages. The Europeans showed up with weapons, gold, and a business model, and they built the market for human lives. Without European demand, there is no transatlantic slave trade. Full stop.
The Bible, at one thing said, the Bible was nothing more than a business, than a Euro-Atlantic 500-year business plan. That's what it was. Now I'm going to play another video that's going to explain to you the African version of slavery.
Many Europeans justified the slave trade by arguing that domestic slavery already existed in the kingdoms of West and Central Africa. I've come to what was once the heart of the Ashanti Empire to meet Professor Wilhelmina Donkor to find out more.
They had no concept of what we now understand as the white Europeans' law that made people, humans, by God, a commodity for commerce. only. And under the idea, property cannot own property. So anything that's yours is not owned no more, because property or commodity can't own no commodity. Think about that, but let's move on.
In the early colonial days, slavery didn't start as permanent. Some Africans were treated as indentured servants, just like poor Europeans. Then white landowners saw an opportunity. Why release a worker when you can just own them forever? Why pay for labor when you can force women to give birth to your next generation of workers? So they changed the laws. If your mother was enslaved, you were too. No exceptions. Becoming Christian didn't mean freedom anymore. White servants got contracts and land. Black people got lifelong bondage. That wasn't confusion. That was strategy. They were never trying to civilize Black people. They were trying to own them forever. But wait, how do you convince a society that all of this is okay? You build a lie. They said Black people were cursed, less intelligent, animal-like. They used scripture. They used fake science, measuring skulls, ranking races, and publishing pseudoscience to prove what they already decided was true. They needed people to believe that we were made for this.
Now, the European, the modern day definition of white, European, were also enslaved, but under different terms. They were enslaved under contract. Remember that word contract? Under contract, they enslaved them, but they didn't have to enslave us under contract because we were already not human. We were property. Okay, and Jesus was the good merchant, according to what I read to you, and bought us all out of sin to become a slave under blessed bondage. These are all documents within the church's documents. I'm not cooking this up. Let's move on. I only got like a few more, and I'm gonna get out your way.
You're saying that the church was involved in the slave trade, or just sat by and said nothing?
The church has taken responsibility. The Catholic Church, the Pope, John Paul II, who's traveled the world around, has gone to Africa in the beginning of this decade, in the 80s, and apologized publicly to Africans for the church's involvement in initiating the slave trade and sustaining the slave trade and helping to maintain it.
All of this is documented in Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery and a whole lot of other books, and his updating of the documentation is in his last book, The Caribbeans from Columbus to Castro. I mean, we're not talking about something we have to even search for. The evidence is so apparent.
I hear tell that that ships that set sail had to be blessed. Is that so? And that went as well for slave ships?
Practically every slave ship that left the ports of Europe was blessed by either a Roman Catholic priest or a Protestant minister. And even the monstrosity of it all can be seen in the East Coast Africa, where in Mombasa, one of the slave forts is called Fort Jesus. We all know about the ship, the good ship Jesus, that was one of the slavers making its way around the coast and across to the New World with our people captive in its hold.
Those missionaries that were opened up in those lands gave spiritual jurisdiction to the Pope over those lands, and people didn't know it. They became the spiritual embassies of what became the enemy, and gave authorization for the actual physical silver key jurisdiction over the land. Jurisdiction, you have to get the land. You have to get the land, and that therefore gives you jurisdiction, because all bondage, feudalism, serfism is all people bonded to the land. That's bondage. We were under bondage because they took our land. Okay, let's move on. Damn, what the hell I'm at? Okay, here we go.
Because if we were human, then the system couldn't be justified. So they rewrote what it meant to be human. White supremacy wasn't born out of slavery. It was born with it. By the 1700s, America wasn't using slavery. It was running on it. Cotton, tobacco, sugar, every dollar was built on Black backs. And our bodies weren't just labor, they were capital. You could borrow money against an enslaved person, insure them, trade them. Black women were forced to give birth not for family, but for profit. They turned wombs into factories. Wall Street involved. Banks invested. Universities funded by it. Presidents benefited. This wasn't a broken system. This was the system. People love to call it America's original sin. But sin sounds like a mistake. This wasn't a mistake. This was a blueprint. A system designed to extract everything from Black life. Labor, language, names, lineage, and leave us buried in unmarked graves. And after they took everything, they rewrote the story to make themselves look like heroes. So no, chattel slavery wasn't about labor. It was about domination, reproduction, and inheritance. It wasn't just brutal. It was intentional, legal, and profitable. And it didn't end when it was abolished. It just evolved into prisons, into housing policies, into generational theft. So you want to talk about American values? Well, this was the first one. And this country has been protecting it ever since.
And she said housing policies, right? Here we go. We're going to run this back.
Buchanan v. Worley involved an African American's attempt to purchase property on an integrated block where there were already 2 Black and 8 white households. The court majority was enamored of the idea that the central purpose of the 14th Amendment was not to protect the rights of freed slaves, but a business rule, freedom of contract.
There go that word contract again. But hold on. We ain't going to stop there. I got my man Boson that's going to tell y'all, out of everything that's changed in the Western world, with everybody, only one thing has remained constant. Check this out.
If they use their own resources, their own minerals, their own materials for their own industries, well, the entire economy of the West would collapse. And with the collapse of their economy, their whole so-called civilization would collapse. Africa is the foundation upon which they built their house. So they know this. And like I said, this is why no matter what else changes in the world, no matter how power dynamics shift in the world, the subjugation of Africa has been maintained for over 800 years. There's literally nothing more important to them than this. And this is why there are very powerful factions in the West that want to destroy BRICS, and why they fearmonger about Chinese investment in Africa, and why America specifically is engaged in non-stop interference, covert operations, regime change, regime infiltration projects all across the continent. And more importantly, they've started to have options, and those options have made their aspirations actually achievable. I'm talking about aspirations of political independence, aspirations of economic sovereignty, aspirations of getting out from under the yoke of the West. That's actually becoming achievable now.
Did it say that part?
What?
But the only thing that remain constant. Did he say that?
Kinda.
Maybe I might have uploaded the wrong video, but he is saying that the only thing that remained constant is that they have not allowed to change is the relationship between the West and Africa, basically because of the resources, natural, raw materials and all that.
Yeah, capitalism is built upon extraction of something.
Yeah, resource, human and, I'm about to play this last video. Then I'm going to read one last thing to y'all, and I'm going to get y'all comments. It's going to be more, if y'all want to say some stuff or ask some stuff, y'all can do that. But check this last one out.
Why do white people pay so much attention to black people if they don't like them? You would think if you didn't like something, why would you be paying attention to it? I don't pay attention to things I don't like.
What's the answer?
The answer is the liar knows what lie he told. You see what I'm saying? So even if I made it deceitful and I made you think that the answer is over here, but the answer is really over here, I'm still going to be looking over here. Me, the one that tricked, because I know this is the right answer. Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity.
For centuries, we've been taught a simple story. White people are always free. Black people are always enslaved. And the transatlantic slave trade was the beginning of the world we live in today. But that story hides something so massive, so disturbing, and so foundational that once you see it, you can never unsee it. Before whiteness existed, before Europe became European, many of the people who became white were themselves enslaved violently, repeatedly, and as property, but in practice. Long before the Atlantic slave system, there were Indo-European conquerors, which we talked about that. Indo-European conquerors darker than modern Europeans, creating a caste hierarchy across the ancient world. But here's the twist. Although the practice of brutal enslavement is ancient, the racial legal caste system that locked Black people into permanent chattel slavery was new, and it rewired the world. That's why people, Black people, you're owed reparation. Reparation is a debt. It's not something negotiable. It is a debt because your humanity was commoditized by someone that came along and took a practice and made it law only for you and for them to profit from. And it's not only today's understanding of white European, it's also Indo-Europeans that profited off of the scheme as well, because they were grandfathered in for whatever reason, within my opinion. But the laws are there, the papers are there, all the evidence is there for you to read. No one should be able to come and tell you that, well, everybody was a slave. Yes, in practice. But the slavery we experienced was codified in law.
Yeah.
That was never done to no one other than us.
Yeah. Slavery in ancient times was cultural, and slavery in modern times is commercial. Always remember that.
But what Thought was saying was exactly right. But they'll try to twist it. The language that I'm giving you is the exact language that they cannot try to get out of. And the unfortunate thing is this: some people that argue this don't understand the fact that this was done to them too as well.
Exactly.
That's why I tell you, there's no person that is to blame. This is all institutional structures that was put in place by the elite, the spiritual, allegedly, spiritual elites that created a theology that enslaved the world. And there were kings that gave over their sovereignty to become a vassal for profit. And it was a universal agreement by everyone that we were the commodity that everybody could get rich off of. But there's a new day, people. There's a new day. I showed you this structure here, and which is going to change everything. I'm going to get y'all comments. The Euro-Atlantic system or Atlantic world is coming to its end. It's reverting back to the Indo-Pacific that's based on land, not maritime sea lanes and all that. And it's going to eventually land back in Afro-Eurasia. Take those terms down, look those terms up, and you will see it'll link up to everything that I've said to you guys today. Now, let's go back a little bit. I don't know if you're still out there, More, but More read the book that I was showing y'all. So More pretty much already know. What up, though? I see baby mama up here right here. I know she came along earlier. I don't know, narcolepsy might have even got her. Okay, Unknown, happy to see you up in here. Salute to you. I ain't seen Unknown this thing in a minute. But Unknown always come check us out later, though. He always leave me something there. So appreciate you, Unknown. That's my brother right there. I know he gone already, but much love to him. Okay, C Money, what you got? Okay, yeah, you read C Money's joint. Yeah, okay. That's what's up, C Money. Appreciate the support as always. I've never seen this. No, I've seen this picture. Wait, hold up. This is that real? I can't see that good. I think that is real. What's going on, family? Yeah, that's what we're trying to give out. Info that our folks can use, man. Okay, there go Preem. Salute to you. He shouted you out too, Thought. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For sure.
Yeah, they get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They commodify spirituality and then commodify humanity.
Mm-hmm. See, Preem, no. So yeah, man, we appreciate y'all, man. I wanted to read some more stuff. I know, but like I say, people get, I mean, you get to read and people get that. My reading ain't the best either. But people get to, everything fast. But some stuff you just can't, give fast. But I hopefully me and Thought gave enough that you guys can grab a hold to and continue to do your own research. I've showed you the book right here that you guys can go grab. It goes much deeper, but it gives it all. It gives you the documents, show you where the books are at, that you can pull the information from, to let so you can see for yourself. Because at the end of the day, we can tell you all day, but it's up for you to see for yourself what's good and come to your own conclusions. But listen, people, give us some thumbs up, some hearts, and all that other good stuff. Subscribe. There go Preem again. Oh, that's because we understand. If you want the game, it's gonna take time. Shit, true game can't come in what 5 or 10 second sound bites. You know what I'm saying? But that's how we know. But I just want our people to be equipped. Now, understand, this ain't against nobody because this is an institutional thing. But Black people to understand, because we get hit so much with everybody was put in slavery. Everybody know we have to articulate the difference in practice and one was in law. Mm-hmm. No one else on this planet has been written into law as a commodity for the purpose of commerce. And understand, slavery still exists in practice. What do I mean? Saudi Arabia, I hear people say Muslims over there and whatever. I ain't gonna say Saudi Arabia, Muslims over there be putting people in slavery. Okay, that slavery is in practice, but it is protected. Why? Because by law, our law, Arabs are considered as white. So therefore, by law, they're still protected. But understand, you still have practices that go on today to give you the understanding of practice and by law. So therefore, example, Dred Scott ran. Dred Scott ran because he was enslaved. Because that was in practice. But when he went to try to get his protection back to not be a slave, they told him they didn't have no rights that they had to respect. Why? Because the law kept him in servitude. That meant he could not go to the court to get his remedy and protection. It's because the court would place him back in that same predicament. That's what's meant. That the law did not protect you. The law endorsed what happened to you, and the law also made you a commodity and did not give you and took away all of your humanity and gave you some humanity back as a privilege in the form of a citizen, but not as your God-given right as a person. That's what the whole thing of 3/4 of a human and all that. because you had no humanity because of the edicts of demarcation that was adopted by all of the European kingdoms that ruled by divine right under the Pope's jurisdiction. And understand, jurisdiction is a major fact when it comes to law, because that's where the law was created. What you got? They figured Dred Scott had a what is it? Bad case of what's that thought? You see it?
No, I didn't on the screen. Not on my screen.
Oh, let me see. I can't. Bad case of I don't know what the fuck the hell that word is. Yeah, you didn't cooked up shit on some day spring. I don't even know what the hell that is. It's bad case of something. Drapped. I don't know. Yeah,
you got me stumped, Birdie.
Yeah, you won today.
Not you won.
Yeah, you won today. You got it. But I mean, y'all look that up because Primo always be coming with some major stuff, man. But okay, here we go. What do you say? It was a diagnosis. Oh, for a runaway slave. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But what it protected, the law protected the person that enslaved him rights to enslave him because he wasn't seen as a human. Yeah. So, yeah. But we ain't going to talk out of death, man. We're going to go and get out y'all way. You got anything else you want to say? Thought?
That's it. They got it.
Okay. That's what's up. And this ain't the most popular thing, but for those that watch it, man, I hope that y'all at least be able to take something from it and be able to define the difference between the two and to understand that reparations is a debt. And when that debt is called for, it's not negotiable. It means you owe. Okay. But as always, I end this thing, man. We got to remember at all time, my people, we got next. Deuces.
Was a king without his crown. Was a cage where your soul found God.